So today we're going to talk about the 16T, which, as I'm sure you can see from looking at the console, is definitely one of my favourites. It's become very much my go-to compressor for all the close mic drum stuff. It's on some of the subgroups, it's on some of the bass guitar feeds. It's really quick, really simple, really easy to use, but really good sounding compression. There's not all of the standard controls that you'd expect to see from a compressor, attack and release and what have you. But don't let that fool you, it's still really, really flexible and we can get some really interesting sounds out of it. It's a very audible compressor. It can be very subtle, but it likes to be very aggressive, a kind of big smack compressor, so hence why I like to use it on the drums and bass DIs and things that have got a lot of front end information. It all kind of comes down to this knee control, which for me is the big thing on this compressor. It's where its personality lies. So with the knee control out, it's just a standard hard knee compressor. So we're kind of thinking about this shape, that as you get up to the threshold, we enter gain reduction. As soon as you put the knee control in, it turns it into a nice big soft knee. So you've got this kind of curved compression. So we kind of go into gain reduction before we hit the threshold. So it's a much more gradual thing. So the key to this is keeping your compression ratios low. If we're kind of up here at 4:1, 6:1, 10:1, we're going to get a lot of gain reduction. And by the time you see a lot of people thinking, well, I'm not, why is it compressing before there? It's because of this soft knee nature that we're going into gain reduction before we get to the threshold. So if we're up at these higher compression ratios, by the time we actually get to the threshold, we've got a hell of a lot of gain reduction. So I'm always kind of staying down here between 2:1, 3:1, something like that. But what that knee does is it kind of gives you the illusion of almost a faster attack and a slower release. So we'll hear in a minute when we listen to some drums that when we put the soft knee in, it kind of rounds off that front end, but just extends the sound a little bit, and you get that nice kind of fat drum sound. So the other thing with that is then the parallel path for me is so important on this compressor, and this is probably my favourite thing with probably across any of the Alan Heath consoles. It's pretty much my favourite feature in general, meaning that we can have parallel compression on every single one of the input channels, on the output channels, but we're not sacrificing any buses, we're not having to do any kind of complex routing. We literally just turn it on and dial it in. So I'll play some examples. So at the moment we've got a kick drum running through this, so I'm going to bypass the parallel to start with and just play you the kick drum. So without the compressor, if we're going to put the compressor in, and then I'm going to take the knee control out, so you can hear now it's just a much more straight on and off compressor. So for me, it's not really, I can hear it ducking, but it's not really doing anything musical for me. As soon as we put this soft knee in, we can hear now it just kind of starts to pull out the tail end of the kick drum and it just rounds off the transient. So for me, that sounds really nice, but the problem is when we put it back in the mix, my kick drum's not really present. And the difference between when I take the knee control out and we go back to hard knee, you start to hear the kick drum, but again, it's just not kind of got that musical, that nice rounded sound that I want. So we'll put the soft knee in, and again, we can see we've got a healthy amount of gain reduction, and I really like sonically what that's doing to the kick drum. Like I say, it's softened that front end. You can just hear it kind of pulling the back end out and kind of extending that bottom end. So as soon as we put the parallel path in then, we go from that kind of really nice sound, but from a utility point of view, it's too soft to cut through a mix. So as soon as I start to dial the drive back in, to me the kind of magic spot always tends to be about minus 10, minus 9, somewhere around there. And we can hear without the parallel path, and then with the parallel path, we can just hear that extra kind of thump. So we've got, sonically, we've got the effect that we wanted from the compressor, but then with the parallel path, we're then kind of regaining that power that we're losing from the compression. So all of that together gives me this really nice big rounded smack kind of kick drum sound. So this is really handy for if you've got drummers that aren't particularly hard hitters. You can make it sound like they're hitting a lot harder, or even like with these guys, this is a guy where you know, he's a big guy like me. He's hitting the drums really hard, so I can then use that transient that he's giving me, and then this compressor's really amazing shape in it. And the other thing on this is we've got this kind of added sidechain feature. So with this, especially on kick drums, a trick of mine is, you know, concentrate on how the guy's playing the drums. So if you've got, like I say, you've got a big guy who's playing heel up and he's really digging in and he's leaving the beater in the kick drum, he's going to dampen the drum a lot more, and that kind of controls the sound. So a kind of full band compression will work there, because you can hear from the kick drum sound I've got a nice big lift on the bottom end, I've got a nice big lift on the top end, so I've got that thump and I've got that click. So actually that full band compression works, and I want the whole kick drum to get compressed at the same time. If we go away from this and we put ourselves, for example, with a jazz band or something like that, and I've got a guy who's just tapping the drums and he's playing heel down and the beat is coming off the kick drum every time, it's going to start to let the drum resonate more. So we might just need to do an extra bit of work to kind of rein in that bottom end. So for me then, kind of something like this, so we can just concentrate the compressor. So it's actually the reverse of what a lot of people would do on a kick drum. You know, some people would dial that in, so it's leaving the bottom end open and slamming the top end. For me, where this really works is the kind of complete opposite, and I'll have the compressor doing something like that, just compressing that low end, and I'm just squeezing that and starting to pull it in, so you're still letting the natural transient of the drum do the work, and then you're shaping the bottom end. So, as I say, I'm not using the sidechain on this particular song, just mainly because of that kick drum sound I've got. I want the whole thing to be hammered. So again, listen to the kick drum with the compressor, and then listen to it without. As soon as we put it in, I get that smack, I get that nice big, really ballsy kick drum sound, and then in the mix, you can hear the whole thing. You get that nice kind of cutting kick drum sound, but you can still feel everything underneath. Same deal with the kick out, pretty much identical. I'm going a little bit high with the compression ratio on this, because I'm not bothered about kind of losing. I want to lose a bit of that, a bit more of the front end, and I'm just thinking about the low end on this. So the more I can squash it, the better. So I've still got the parallel path in. I've still got a lot of my dry signal coming back in, but I am going heavy with the compression. You can see we've got quite a healthy amount of gain reduction here. Again, without it, and as soon as we put it in, again, it's a really subtle thing, but as soon as you put it in with the other kick drum mic, and then we just listen to the finished kick drum sound, which has actually got a 160 on it as well. We've got no parallel path in this, and I'm down at 2:1, and this is just kind of almost, I've done my shaping on the kick in and out channels with the parallel path and with what we were just talking about. Everything's then going into a subgroup where I'm doing a little bit more EQ, and then I'm treating both kick drum mics together as one. It's one instrument, so that's kind of, you know, that's what we're trying to recreate in the end. And then this is just a little bit of housekeeping compression that's just going to make it sit in the mix. So again, without it, with it in, it's just, again, just taking off that extra little bit of click and just kind of controlling the bottom end. But within the mix, it's doing what I want. With the toms, it's the same thing. Same thing, you can just hear, it's bringing out that nice kind of extra bit of resonance on the drums. So I'll probably hit a little bit harder. You know, we can see again, I'm kind of up at 4:1, which is quite high for that soft knee compressor. But it's again, because with the toms, I really want to take advantage of that resonance. So with a loud rock band like this on a big stage, you know, we're going to be gating drums. If we're in the studio, I never want to touch a gate on the drum kit. I want to hear the toms resonate. You know, it's the right heads, it's the right tuned drum kit. So I want to take advantage of all that resonance. In a live situation, I've got to gate the drums quite hard. So what this compressor does, and being able to use again that parallel path, it's bringing up that resonance and kind of keeping the resonance a lot stronger than it potentially would be, which just keeps the gate open for that little bit longer without, you know, without having to rely on nasty resonance from the drums, from kind of a badly tuned tom. So it really is a kind of proper kind of power giver, if you like. You know, as I say, if we've got a guy who's hitting really soft, we can make him sound like he's hammering the drums. If we've got a guy hammering the drums, even better, because then it's giving us more that we can then shape with that compressor. So the other thing that I love the 16T for on drums is for snare bottom, which is often very overlooked, but one of my favourite tricks comes from the snare bottom mic. I'm actually using it for a lot of weight in the drum, but I'm also using it for that kind of delicacy and the intricacy, bringing out the intricacies of the play and the ghost notes and things like that. The snare drum is one of the most dynamic instruments on stage, so not paying attention to the snare bottom, which is where that kind of articulation comes from. You know, as I say, it's very often overlooked. So for me, with the snare bottom, if we're going to listen to it without the compressor, you can see we've got a lot of that transient information. It's a very kind of front end heavy, edgy sound. Again, you know, we all know snare bottom doesn't particularly sound great on its own, but it's about capturing the multiple different elements of that instrument to then give us the whole snare drum sound that our ears hear. So I don't really want that kind of transient front end off it, because I'm getting that obviously from the top mics. So I don't need that in the snare bottom. So what I'm going to do when I put the compressor in, you'll instantly hear that disappears. And we could even probably get away with a little bit more compression on that. And you hear again that kind of length, and it just kind of gives it that and brings out that kind of back end of the snare drum without. It's a very sharp, snappy sound. But again, I'm getting that from those top mics, so I don't really need that from the bottom. What I want is that detail. So with that compression in, instantly you can hear it's really hammering the initial transient, but it backs off quite quick, but it takes enough time to back off that it just still holds that back end of the hit in compression. So it gives me that kind of, it really brings out that detail. As soon as we get into pushing the output gain of the compressor, without it, again, really sharp, not particularly doing much for me. As soon as we put it in, rounds it off, but then you hear that tss at the end of the drum, which then, as soon as we put that in with the top mics, without just the top mics, as soon as we put that bottom mic in, just starts to give us that nice end of the sound, if you like. So when we put that in the mix, so I've got that nice big fat snare drum sound, but again, that nice kind of hiss almost, if you like, that's not too over the top. If you're going for a much kind of looser, like indie sounding snare drum, if you like, for want of a better term, again, that trick works really well, but just pushing it a little bit harder so that snare bottom's a lot more audible, and it'll give you that nice big lengthy roomy snare drum sound. So yeah, that's definitely one of my tricks, and the 16T really helps me get that. So the other thing that I would just want to focus on is, again, with the bass guitar, we've got it here. So I've got the knee control out, because again, you'll hear the difference in this. I've got a higher ratio, again, at 4:1. With the knee control out, I'd be looking at kind of 4:1, 6:1. So listen to the bass guitar. We've got the compression out at the moment, and we can hear a lot of that kind of front end information from the initial pluck of the strings, which is really nice. But when we put it in with the kick drum, it just starts to get a little bit muddy. So as soon as we put the compressor in, we can hear it's just starting to, again, really subtle, but it's just starting to take that front end off. So I'm at a quite high ratio here. Again, if we put that soft knee in, you really actually, you know, what it's doing musically is really nice, and it's fattened the bottom end up a lot. But with this, for that kind of lengthy bottom end, I'm actually looking at the bass post. So in this situation here, as nice as that sounds, in the whole mix, I'm actually going to take that back out and just get a bit of that kind of clonk, that kind of clack back off the front end. So all I'm doing is quite a nice even bass sound is this. So I'm just kind of taking that front end off it and just leveling it out. And the difference when I put that back in with the kick drum is we've now gone back to the kick drum, the transient of the kick drum being the leading instrument, which is what I want in this, and then the bass guitar's filling around it. So again, there's no parallel path on this. Knee control out, That enables me to kind of get away with a higher compression ratio, just pushing a little bit of output gain. Again, the difference is that just gives me that nice forward bass sound in the mix. So that's just a few uses of the 16T compressor. I'm sure you can see why it's one of my favourites. Throw it on any channel and straight away you're into really usable, really musical, good sounding gain reduction. There's so many more uses for it, but that's just a couple of where I would put it in this track and have fun playing. Cheers.